There is nothing quite like a good horror movie to put an audience on edge. When it comes to movies made for unsettling people, the horror genre is beyond compare. It thrives on inducing cold sweats and leaving viewers terrified. And it reigns supreme as a visual anxiety attack. From the earliest silent film horrors, through the slasher boom and video nasty generation, straight through to more recent trends like found footage and so-called elevated horror. The motive of horror directors has always remained the same. The goal is to get the audience scared, caught off guard and peering over their shoulder on the walk home, or double-checking the back of their wardrobe before going to bed. With that in mind then, this list has been compiled from the horror movies that are guaranteed to get your heart hammering, pulse racing, and sweat glands working overtime. For my fellow perpetual warriors, prepare to be scared. I am the stressed Ash from What Culture Horror, and these are the 8 most anxiety-inducing horror movies. 8. The Exorcist. Well, you knew it had to be on this list. Where a lot of iconic, classic horror masterpieces are more atmospheric or influential than outright scary, first-time viewers are likely to be blown away by how relentlessly effective The Exorcist remains decades after its initial release. Yes, it is hugely famous and widely parodied, and as such feels like it couldn't possibly hit hard anymore. But it is a combination of the film's slow, deliberate pace and the regular sudden jolts of terror that make it such an enduringly anxious watch, as well as some still taboo shocks and clever filmmaking tricks. The subliminal shots leave the audience constantly on edge, unaware why they're unsettled but nonetheless shook. Meanwhile, while on-screen effects and gore may have grown more explicit in the years since its release, few mainstream releases have managed to include imagery as gasp-inducing as the film's infamous crucifix sequence. Still the greatest to ever do it, this iconic horror manages to be as gripping as ever thanks to sequences that no amount of parody can soften the effectiveness of. 7. The Descent. Released in 2005 and almost ignored by audiences thanks to tragic timing, the movie came out in the UK mere days before a devastating underground bombing. Neil Marshall's The Descent remains a stressful tribute to the director's horror prowess a decade and a half later. The film is methodically paced, opening with one brutal blast of shock before taking its time setting up characters and grounding their reality for the viewer. This subterranean horror succeeds in terrifying the audience and leaving them constantly on edge thanks to a cleverly constructed screenplay that taps into every deeply resonant human fear. Opening with the existential horror of losing loved ones, the film then moves into the much more primal and immediately impactful fear of tight, confined spaces, where it lingers throughout the unbearably slow and tense spelunking sequences. It's only after dragging viewers from fears of emotional tragedy through to more physically resonant trauma that the film finally reveals its trump card. The misshapen cave monsters are terrifying in themselves, but their shock appearance wouldn't be anywhere near as effective if the film hadn't gradually ratcheted up the tension and dug into the audience's bone-deep anxieties, before, digging the bones out of its cast. 6. Maniac. Maniac is a remake of the infamous 1980 horror of the same name. Released in 2012, this intense video nasty makes expert use of POV camera to leave the viewer deeply disturbed. The entire film takes place from the perspective of its antagonist, a troubled serial killer whose issues with his overbearing mother have led to an adulthood of scalping women and dressing mannequins in their skin. So it's not hard to see why this one would be anxiety-inducing then. But what makes the film so much more effective than many entries into the psychological horror subgenre is this potentially gimmicky but unnervingly effective camera work. Yes, Elijah Wood is superb in the central role, and the one perspective conceit gives the actor nowhere to hide. But it's the approach itself which makes this a nerve-shredding experience. Where slasher films are known for dropping viewers into the killer's point of view for some sequences, they typically have a final girl for the audience to relate to. Here, seeing the world through this psycho's eyes leaves viewers hoping you'll escape detection and survive, thanks to the pesky human instinct for self-preservation, which is turned against us expertly. 5. A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place has a simple premise that may not stand up to a lot of logical scrutiny. Some ideas are simply resonant in a deep way, and A Quiet Place's tale of a family attempting to survive in post-apocalyptic America by being as quiet as possible to avoid detection by sound-sensitive beasts is one of them. The film begins brutally and never lets up throughout its almost silent, taut runtime. First off, the opening sequence kills one of the kids, breaking an unspoken cardinal rule of horror and making it clear that no one is safe. From there on out, the tiny cast means there are no disposable victims to off, like, in something like Bird Box, whilst the family unit provides an inherently compelling set of characters who the audience wants to protect. After all, no one would cheer on the murder of groups of delinquent teens in slasher films if they were painted as this tight-knit, innocent family unit in the same way. 4. Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity took the rough found footage blueprint and refined the approach to an unbearably effective anxiety delivery system. The only movie to make a perfectly still, unmoving room seem terrifying, Paranormal Activity's success comes down to what is in essence a stripped-down remix of The Descent's approach. Starting slow and small scale, the film forces viewers to watch an almost unmoving, boring empty room, where something like the Blair Witch Project, as another found footage offering, provided constant motion, noise and distraction. It's set in the supposed safe haven of suburbia, so where the earlier found footage hit had viewers yelling, "Just don't go into the woods, idiot!" This time the horror comes from an idyllic bastion of safety and comfort. Finally, once the scares start, they transition from being external forces acting on our characters to internal possession. The switch which renders the entire film scarier, as Paranormal Activity has now taken your bedroom, your home, your domestic bliss, and even your spouse, and turned them all into potentially terrifying sources of unshakable anxiety. 3. High tension. The twist may be risible, but the opening hour of High Tension is unbearably tense, like the name suggests, and a genuinely terrifying cinematic nightmare. The film displays a skill with suspense and gore, more than earning its title along the way. The slow build-up establishes the film's remote location, and the gradual, atmospheric early glimpses of the villain leave the audience certain something awful is coming. But the film's patient approach means that the eventual home invasion sequence feels like it will have to be a relative relief, thanks to how nerve-shredding the build-up has been. Then the scene arrives, and the ingenious decision to leave some violence unseen and some explicitly dwelled upon leaves the viewer uncertain and on edge, unsure where they stand, and unprepared for whatever is coming next. Including, yes, a hilarious twist. 2. Possession. Released in 1981, Possession may have been branded a video nasty by overzealous UK censors, but viewers would be hard-pressed to work out why for most of the film's runtime. Not that the lack of gore makes it an easier watch. Following the gradually dissolving marriage of a squinty, paranoid Sam Neill and a spectacular Isabel Adjani as his deeply troubled wife, the film makes mincemeat of other relationship breakdown movies like Marriage Story and Kramer vs. Kramer. The first hour is a brutal and almost unwatchably tense portrait of a marriage falling apart. Both participants are being put through some psychological hell. But just when this sad story of love lost to distrust has put viewers through the ringer, it takes a sharp left turn into an entirely different genre. Marrying violent, disturbing horror with upsettingly intense domestic drama makes this a rare film where the arrival of a monster feels like it would be a relief from the vitriol of the characters' hate for one another. Until it happens. 1. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's no denying that this one was a predictable pick for number 1. There's also no denying, by anyone who has seen Tobe Hooper's 1974 horror, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that it's the film most deserving of the title, the most anxiety-inducing horror film ever. Shot on a shoestring and featuring no recognisable famous faces, this gruesome cannibal horror is grimier, grittier, and more upsettingly real feeling than any number of reboots and sequels. Where the remake and later reboots featured flashy camera work and impressive effects, the cheapness of this production is tangible in everything from the rundown settings to the greasy surfaces of the sets. Yes, many later rip-offs attempted to ape this style and some come close, but even the film's lack of on-screen gore makes it a more upsettingly anxious watch. There are no unintentionally funny moments of comic relief where the viewers can laugh at an unconvincing decapitation here. Instead, death takes place quickly, brutally, and often off-screen, with the audience eventually left as shattered as the film's disturbed final girl. And that's our list. What horror movies set your nerves on edge? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. I've been Ash over on social media @AshMillman, and this has been What Culture. Thanks for watching.